All right, y'all, let's get into my thoughts on this new Usher album. Y'all ready? Let's go.
I came to vibe, you came to function, just do that, baby. Don't worry about nothing, no.
What's good, y'all? It's your boy Bright here, the R&B kid, and I'm back again with another episode of On the Bright Side TV. Welcome back, y'all. How you doing? Hope you're doing very well. Listen, y'all know I had to hop up on this camera so I could talk about Usher's new album, Coming Home. Yeah, listen, this is Usher's time. I had to give it up for Usher. This is Usher's time, so I had to, give love to him and make this video for this album. They call me USHERRAYMOND. Let me tell you what you want from me. Shout out that guy Usher, man. Shout out Usher, one of my favorite artists of all time, an iconic artist. I'm glad he's finally back on the scene. But yeah, man, I just want to talk about, Usher's revival. I've loved seeing it since last year. I've been getting my life watching it. Because let's be real, he's deserved for so long. He's deserved resurgence that is owed to him because he's still like one of our greatest, male R&B artists. And I feel like for a long time, a lot of people kind of forgot about that and kind of like just, kind of put him to the side, because he wasn't like, doing things commercially like how he was doing like back in his heyday in the 90s and 2000s. But Usher to me has always been amazing, even throughout the 2010s and until now. So I'm so glad that he's had this resurgence that he's so deserved. He's had an amazing storm of events and marketing that has brought him to this perfect opportunity and place and time to finally drop this latest album. So I've loved that his team has been able to kind of coordinate all of that. Starting out last year with him really coming back onto the scene with the tiny desk that really started it all. Watch this. He had a tiny desk. He killed that. And then we went to, his team establishing the Vegas residency, which was amazing. I'm so mad I didn't go. I never saw it, but I saw plenty of clips. I heard plenty of great reviews, so I know he killed that. And that's something I kind of regret that I never got to see it, but I know it was an amazing show. So, he had an amazing run in Vegas, doing his residency last year in 2023. And now, he got the gig to do the Super Bowl, and he did a great job at the Super Bowl. He did it last week. He's just had, and then he dropped the album pretty much the same week he did the Super Bowl. So it was perfect, and I really feel like I want to commend him and his team for just the coordination of I feel like the steady role that they've been on since 2022, 2023 to really get him back into the limelight in the way that he deserves. So I love that for him and his team. In terms of the Super Bowl, I want to talk about that real quick. I definitely thought the Super Bowl was great. I loved, shout out to the 49ers and the Chiefs. The game was cool as well. The game was cool. And I definitely think Taylor Swift was the reason why it was the most watched Super Bowl of all time so far, which is unfortunate, but whatever, America. But I also want to believe that Usher was a big part of that as well, obviously. But yeah, man, I thought Usher did a great job. I do have, a few critiques, mainly I wasn't in love with a lot of the audio throughout the performance, even though I love the fact that he did it all live, the mic was on. So of course I commend that, and he showed that he could sing, the mic was on, and I love that. But I also kind of wish we have more of the backing track throughout some songs, just to really give it that communal stadium feel. I feel like a lot of times we were trying to hear Usher trying to catch his breath and sing and stuff, and he didn't sound bad, but I feel like it would have just sounded better and felt better if we could heard more of the backing tracks for these big hits, these big songs, But at the end of the day, I fully commend him for doing it fully live, which was better than most of y'all faves can do, let's be honest. And I also think I wish he, everyone who planned it did more with the production value. I feel like, even though he had the strip poles and the strippers and he had, the outfits and, all the background dancers and all that, it was still great, but I feel like him and his team in the Super Bowl and NFL could have had a little bit more in the name of production value, but it wasn't a big thing, but I feel like they could have been more. And also, I think lastly, it's just the pacing and how rushed it felt. I really wish he didn't rush through so many songs, or I wish maybe take some songs out so we could have heard more songs longer. I didn't need Alicia Keys doing If I Ain't Got You, because that's not connected to Usher at all. And also she croaked at the beginning, which was unfortunate. So yeah, we didn't need some things, but at the end of the day, overall, I feel like Usher killed it in terms of his stage presence, his energy, his choreography. He brought the skates, and I feel like he had a good balance of his most well-known songs. He could have done. I think the set list could have been a little bit. It could have been tweaked a little bit better, but I still thought the musical arrangements were amazing. Shout out to Adam Blackstone. No, I think Adam Blackstone did help, but I also know that They said Lil Jon was, I think he like helped like, create the set list and all that, and I think he helped with the musical arrangements as well. So shout out Lil Jon. He also did Turn Down for What, and he came in with at the end with Yeah. So that was great. I really think Super Bowl was pretty good for the most part. It definitely to me was one of the, I want to say it was like one of the top, I want to say like top 5, top 10 performances I've ever seen at the Super Bowl. I loved it. Even though it wasn't perfect, it was still like Usher in his bag, and I loved it. So that's my little review of the Super Bowl. I loved it. But now let's get into Coming Home. So this is Usher's 9th album. He dropped it on February 9th, 2024 on the new independent label Omega, distributed by Gamma. And on this album, it's mostly an R&B and pop album. It has some traces of like other genres, like hip hop in some places, a little bit of alternative in some places, but this is mostly an R&B and pop album. In terms of people who worked on the album, there's so many different producers. We have so many people on here, but just to name a few. We have Feels on some tracks. Shout out to the Afrobeats world. Shout out to Feels. We have Melon Musk on Good Good. Ghost Kid on a few tracks. The Dream on several of these tracks. Shout out to The Dream. Pharrell on a track. Tricky Stewart. Her on Risk It All, the Hit Boy on a track, Rico Love, Jermaine Dupri and Brian Michael Cox worked on several tracks as well, so we love that link up as well. That's a classic reunion for Usher. Let's see, Bam, D-Mile on some tracks as well. So yeah, man, a lot of great people on this album. So let's get into the album overall. Let's get into it. All right, y'all, so let's get into my overall thoughts on the album. I guess I'll just start off by saying that, let me say, like, when I first heard the album, my first listen, and I'm glad I didn't film a reaction to it because I feel like it would have been false. On my first listen of the album, I listened to it like, at midnight on Friday when it dropped, and I was so excited for it, and I listened to it, and I was extremely let down. Especially like those first few tracks, besides Good Good, I was like, oh, when I heard Coming Home, I was like, okay, this is kind of a mid intro. And then I heard, Cold Blooded, A-Town Girl, and some other tracks, and I was like, okay, this album is not what I thought it should have been. So on my first listen, I really was thrown off by it, and I just thought it was really whack. And I think a lot of people feel the same way, probably because they've not listened to it again and really lived with it. I think this is an album where on first listen, and it totally makes sense, it does not come off that well. And I think the biggest problem with that, and the reason why I think I felt this way, and I think this is the consistent thing that I think a lot of people will feel with this album, especially if you only listen to it like one time, is the sequencing. I think overall, I think this album is good. I think it's a great album, and I'll go into everything more. But I think overall, even though my first listen was bad, after having listened to the album several times since it came out, and after having really lived with it, I really feel like this album is good. But I think a lot of times the reason why a lot of people don't realize it's good, or they don't even think it's good, is because even though I think a lot of people don't really, like, a lot of people aren't really pointing out bad songs. I don't, besides like a few, but a lot of people aren't really pointing out a lot of songs being bad. I think they're just pointing out the album experience, which is the real issue. Because I think this album really suffers from really poor sequencing, and I think that's the biggest thing that really draws this album down and doesn't make it as iconic and it doesn't make it as memorable as it should be, because it's so all over the place, not sonically, but it's all over the place in terms of just the sequencing. And I'm really surprised, with Usher being such a veteran and with him having so many trusted voices around him, I'm really surprised that his team really sequenced this album the way they did, because I feel like the sequencing doesn't allow this album to shine as well as it should, if that makes sense. And so I think besides the sequencing, I also think the fact that, with him being, he's grown now, he's in his 40s, he's not put out an album in like 8 years. This album really felt like it was going to be a moment for his fans and for himself and for his legacy and his catalog. And it kind of is, but it doesn't feel like the moment it should have been, because it doesn't really have a strong concept. 8701 didn't really have a concept, but it kind of did in terms of like, having like the U's in most of those song titles before he switched it up at the last minute. And then, Confessions, his magnum opus to this day, that had a great concept throughout. So that made it, an amazing and landmark album to this day. Like, a lot of his albums have had great concepts in a way, but this album is an album where even though everything sounded great, it didn't really have a concept. And I think that also brought the vibes down. This album, I'm not gonna say it felt like a mixtape, but it really did feel like somewhat rushed in the way it was put together and executed with the vision and the artistic output that it delivered. it doesn't sound bad, it doesn't feel bad, but because there's no strong concept and there's no strong thorough there's no strong like line between a lot of these records. I think it kind of lets down a lot of fans who expected something bigger and more, who expected more of a bolder artistic statement. These songs are all great, but because this album lacks like a real concept and true vision on a different level that I think a lot of us were hoping Usher would have been able to execute at this at this stage in his career, I think that's what kind of brings down the album. And I think another big thing is, even though a lot of these songs are great, I think this album also kind of is lacking. And a lot of those really big, it has some, I think it does, but I think it's lacking in having an abundance of those like really big classic songs, that kind of like, harken back to his previous eras of his heyday, but like in a new, fresh and forward thinking way. I think, there's several great songs on this album that I feel like could like be big hits, but I feel like a lot of these songs just feel like more serviceable songs that maybe like any other artist could have had. And that's not a bad thing, but I like, this album was 8 years in making. It's Usher. I think a lot of times, a lot of our legends and our icons lose sight of the fact that, like think about the fact that you've been making music for so long. Like at some point, it's not about just making songs that sound good and feel good. It's about really trying to push the envelope and push yourself to really, hone in on like a new vibe and something new that your fans can chew on in terms of whether it's sonically or conceptually or just how you deliver the music, something like. So I feel like this album was kind of lacking, those big classic songs, like, the Confession songs, like 8701 songs and the My Way songs, like those songs that just felt like, generational classic R&B timeless records. Like we have some of those here, but I think there's not enough of that on this album. There's just a lot of like, tracks that like are just good, but like anybody could have had them. It's not like they don't feel like they're game changers, if that makes sense. So I think that's kind of the issue with this album, but it doesn't mean that these songs don't go off and that they're not great. So don't get me wrong. So I think I would say that's my biggest overall statement and summary of how I would like outline my main critique and issue with the album that I have, and that I also feel like a lot of other people have as well. But don't get me wrong, even though I just said all that, I definitely want to, highlight that there's still several gems sprinkled throughout this whole album. There's so many great songs on this album. And while some risk worked better than others on the album, I still appreciate it. I definitely appreciated the new sonic palette. No, not new, but I appreciated the sonic palette that he tried to implement on some places on this album. Namely like, the songs were more of like the Afro pop, Afro beat vibe, like produced by Feels, like Coming Home and Ruin, and tracks like Big that had a really interesting sound, Margiela. I feel like some songs I feel like he kind of played with a sound that he's not really played with before. It wasn't like game changing, but I still appreciated some things. I feel like some things worked better than others, but I still appreciate the fact that he tried some new things sonically on this album for sure. So, and even besides that, the songs that are very more classic and in tune with his usual sound, a lot of them sounded great and were executed pretty well. So I think what really holds a lot of this album together is a lot of the amazing production. I think this album has so much good production on it. Shout out to all the producers. There's such, interesting and enjoyable production on this album. Not much of it is groundbreaking, but it's still a lot of great production on this album. And I think that's what really holds it together. But unfortunately, what kind of brings that part down, I think a lot of people don't really like recognize and don't really commend how good the album really sounds and how, how expensive it feels, is because of a lot, I feel like the production was let down, not by every song, but by a lot of songs. It was let down by like immature and shallow lyrics that were kind of, devoid of a real message and just really didn't feel like they were up to the caliber of what someone like an Usher should be singing about. And I feel, let me know if y'all feel me, but I feel like that's a lot of people's issue, is like, even though these albums, they sound good, they bopping, it's like a lot of these songs, you're like, is a 45-year-old man really singing this and in this way? But I think at the end of the day, it wasn't as grating as it should be in terms of, the immature lyrics. I don't think it was as big of an issue as I think it should have been for someone like Usher at his age and at this stage in his career, because of all the great, musical arrangements on this album, and because of all the amazing vocals and the vocal performances on the album. I think, the great production and the way the music is arranged and the amazing vocal work that he did throughout this whole album really kind of hides the fact that this album has so many songs that should have been written a little bit more creatively and just better and more in tune with, like, you know, his age and where he's at in his life, and, like, you know, just some of his stature. I think a lot of people, like the youngins, they're not gonna trip. Like the you know, young kids, they're not gonna trip because they love this stuff. You know, but for people like me that kind of, like, you know, like late 20s and their 30s, 40s and above, like, I think a lot of us are definitely going to enjoy a lot of these songs sonically, but then we'll hear the words and we're like, huh? You know? But like I said, it's not that bad, because at the end of the day, while some lyrics you might be like, huh, you'll still rock to it because you're hearing these lyrics on amazing production by a singer who is singing his ass off and like singing his ass off on this amazing record. So this, you know, I think that's really what this is. That I feel like it's one of, like, the biggest hallmarks of this album. Amazing production, you know, amazing musical arrangements, melodies, you know, just really well put together music, and he's singing his ass off. But then, you know, once in a while you'll be like, oh, this song is kind of immature lyrically, and, like, this song is kind of shallow. This song ain't really talking about nothing, but you're not really bothered by it because the song is such a vibe. So yeah. I think some examples of this are definitely, you know, Coming Home, A-Town Girl for sure, Bop, Big, and On the Side. I feel like those are all examples of songs that, like, sounded great. He was singing his ass off, but then, like, lyrically, you were kind of like, I feel like this could have been better. It almost felt like Usher was trying to, like, please everybody on this album, and it felt like he was trying to, like, you know, hit all sections of his fan base. And I totally commend that effort, and I understand the desire to do that, and it makes, you know, complete sense at this stage in his career. You know, Super Bowl, Vegas, like, you know, he has more eyes on him than ever. So I can understand the desire to want to, you know, appease the kids and appease the pop fans and appease, you know, this and that. And I understand the desire to want to please everybody, and it felt like that's what he was trying to do in this album, and I get it. But I feel like this album definitely would have been better served, you know, with more focus and cohesion around, you know, the sounds and the topics at play. It almost feels like Usher was honing in on making this classic, timeless, you know, R&B project, almost kind of like a sequel or like an updated, you know, version of Confessions for this new time. It feels like he was, like, working on making that in the past few years when he was, you know, recording for the album, you know, especially with the sessions with, you know, Jermaine Dupri and Brian Michael Cox, which I feel like a lot of those songs that he made with them were scrapped for the final project. Like, you know, they still have songs here, but it feels like all those songs that he was making with Jermaine Dupri and Brian Michael Cox, I feel like they all got scrapped for the final project, which is a shame, because I haven't heard on Twitter the other day, like, a song that sounded amazing and it wasn't even on the final album. I'm like, where is that song? Like, yeah, so it feels like he was, like, working on this, like, amazing classic project, and it seems like I feel like, you know, since he got the Vegas residency and since he knew he was doing Super Bowl, it feels like once he knew he got these recent gigs, it's almost like he kind of like started from scratch, kind of scrapped that album that I feel like was going to be Confessions 2, like scrapped that, started from scratch, and went in, like, a whole new direction, like focusing on modern vibes and, like, more, like, basic songs to appease, you know, more people. And I get it, you know, I totally get it. Like I said, I get it. But at the end of the day, Usher is in a league of his own, and I really wish he focused on, you know, just feeding his base, you know, feeding his, you know, his real original base. Not trying to make the song sound old as hell, but just, you know, focusing on his base that got him to where he is, feeding them and really letting them be, like, I feel like his guiding light for how the album should have ended up, you know, at the end. And yeah, I just, you know, I wish he also didn't focus on just vibes that don't allow him to shine as an artist. And he had songs here that definitely allowed him to shine, but I feel like he also I feel like there were several songs that he probably left off of this album that would have really allowed him to shine as Usher, you know what I'm saying? Like as Usher, not just as an R&B artist, you know, but really had the Usher DNA. I feel like he didn't include all the songs on this project that really would have let him shine as, you know, as well as he could have when he's in his best element, you know, like that early 2000s era, but like not making it sound dated and like at that time, but I feel like he could have made, you know, more updated, more fresh versions of what he did at that time. And I feel like he was going in that direction, but I feel like he kind of like veered off at some point, and we got the album we have now. And this is not a bad album at all. But I almost wonder like what it would have been like if he had given us that album that seemed like it was more focused and honing in on more of that, if that makes sense. The next thing I want to talk about is the album title. I really feel like the title of this album is literally just the title, and I feel like it doesn't actually connect to the theme of this album at all. Like, besides the fact that I guess he linked up with, some producers that he's, worked with in the past, Jermaine Dupri by Michael Cox and Rico Love and The Dream and, Pharrell and all that. So I think besides the fact that he linked up with some of his, producers from back in the day, I don't really feel like anything else about this album gives Coming Home. Like, so I really am annoyed by that. I'm irked by the fact that he stuck with this title. I kind of wish he went with a different title because I feel like it's kind of giving this album fraudulent energy, because the album title Coming Home gives you an idea of like, he's going to come back to like, him at his peak in the early 2000s in terms of like, the way it's executed and the way it sounds and feels. And some of that is still here, but at the end of the day, besides him reuniting with producers that he's worked with in the past, this album title Coming Home never felt like a strong album title, and it doesn't really feel accurate because nothing about this album really feels like triumphant or nostalgic. Besides, producers that he's worked with before. But besides that, the music itself, there's not a lot of it that really feels, like I said, triumphant, nostalgia, like you're coming home, like he, he's back home and he's comfortable and he's in his bag. Like, it's a cool title. I'm not offended by it, but I also feel like he could have had a more unique title that would have been more relevant to this album and how it feels and sounds. Coming Home is not a bad title, but I feel like it feels like a title that's not really actually connected to this album and like what it signifies and how it actually came out in the end. So I was a little bit annoyed by this title, but it's not that egregious. But I just wanted to mention that for y'all. He spent a lot of time, talking about how like, Coming Home, like this album was like a celebration of love and joy. And, while that's definitely sprinkled in here throughout several tracks for sure, it's funny because he's talking about coming home and this album it's all about love and joy. But there's also a lot of songs here that are actually like really messy and talking about like the messiness of love. So I'm not really sure why on the promo trail when he was doing Super Bowl and all that, like every interview was like, yeah, this album is about love and all that. I'm like, yeah, but there's also a lot of songs on this album that are like messy and talk about like some mess, like, you know what I'm saying? And like, like basic life shit and like, player shit, like being a player. Like, not every song here is like talking like, celebrating and uplifting love in the best way possible. So, for example, like, A-Town Girl, Cold Blooded, Kissing Strangers, On the Side for sure, Margella, Room in a Room. I feel like these are all songs that kind of like, not negative vibes, but they're not really like talking about like, the good parts of love. So, and that's fine. I feel like it's good for an album to talk about, the highs and lows of love. But I wish he didn't paint this album as being like this like joyous celebration of love, because it's not really that the whole time. And that's fine. But I don't know why he painted it like that. But so I just want to talk about that. Not a big deal, but I just want to mention it. And kind of finishing up my critiques for the album, I just wanted to mention a few more things. I also feel like, especially because, Usher's from like the era of like, interludes and skits on albums. He's from that time period where it was the normal. I kind of wish he really had brought that back. And I feel like this album would have really benefited from having like some really cool interludes or like skits, between, maybe like 2, 3, or 4 of them. I feel like it would have been really cool to have had like, either like one theme running throughout like, 2, 3, 4 interludes or skits, or maybe having different, ideas and concepts for skits. I feel like it would have been really cool to have that. I feel like Usher could have easily like, figured that out and put that in the album. And I feel like it would have made it really feel like more of a classic, well sequenced, well put together project. I feel like the lack of interludes on this album definitely makes sense. It's 20 tracks already. So I understand why he probably didn't want to add, But if anything, I feel like I would have, cut the track list, cut the fluff, put more interludes, and just put better songs in general. So that's what I would have done. So not a big deal, but I feel like that's definitely a critique I have for the album, especially him being a artist from the 2000s where that was so popular back in the day. I would have loved for him to have added interludes and skits. I would have loved that for this project. And not a big deal at all, but I also am surprised that we didn't really get at least like another ballad or two on the album besides Risk It All. Risk It All is a gorgeous song. Shout out to her. She produced it. But I feel like Risk It All is the actual like only ballad on the album, which is fine. But when you think about Usher, he's an amazing balladeer. with with that voice of his, he makes amazing ballads. I'm kind of surprised we didn't get like at least another one or two ballads on the album. Like, think about that. That's kind of crazy. Like, especially with him being like more grown and mature. You think he would have really got into his ballad bag, like not for the whole project, but just at least one. The fact that throughout this whole album, I feel like I want to say we only have one ballad is kind of crazy. Like, Risk It All is the only ballad on the album. So for me, I feel like I would have really at least had another ballad or two on the album. I feel like this album needed that, to have more of that balance and vibe. I feel like it could have used another ballad or two, like Risk It All, but in a different way. So I would have loved that, but it's not a big deal. But I'm definitely surprised we didn't have more ballads for sure. And the last critique I have is, speaking of tracks that made the album versus ones that didn't and all that, and the sequencing. I also am I'm not surprised, but I think it's a shame and it's crazy to think that all the pre-release singles that preceded the album, like Don't Waste My Time with LMA, Bad Habits, that song was so fire. Love Bad Habits, Glue, so many pre-release songs that came before the album were left off the final version. And I understand why they were, but I kind of wish that wasn't the case, because I feel like all those tracks were even better than some of the songs that made the final album. Especially, Don't Waste My Time, Bad Habits. That song should have been on this album. Glue was fire. Like, yeah, man. So it really makes me mad that, and I understand why, because they're so old at this point, but I kind of wish he just put them on the album anyways, because they're all great songs. I feel like they've been better than some of the ones that made the album, to be honest. But it is what it is. And I feel like if it had a lot of those tracks on the album, I feel like it would have made the album more of the masterpiece that it should have been. And also, speaking of that, if y'all want to check it out, I actually did, go ahead and I made a new playlist. You can go to the link below in the description. I made a playlist that kind of like restructures this entire album based off of the sequencing that I feel like it should have had to have made it way better. And I feel like I actually killed it. Let me know what y'all think. So pretty much what I did, I just like rearranged the album, rearranged the track list to like make like a new version of Coming Home with like some of the old songs I put in there as well. And I just restructured this whole track list so I feel like it sounds like more of like a masterpiece. So let me know what y'all think. Let me know, rock out to let me know how I feel. Let me know if y'all think the vibes are cool, if y'all check it out. But the Spotify link is in the description. Definitely check it out. Let me know what y'all think. But I'm proud of it. I think I did a great job. And I feel like, to me, that playlist and anybody else who do like a similar thing shows that this album is actually really good. It's just the fact that the sequencing is so weird that you don't really get to like really revel in how good it is. But I think with good sequencing, this album actually is amazing. So let me know if y'all think I made a better version of the album down below. Let me know what y'all think. All right, now let me get into some things that I love about this album. First, I definitely have to talk about the vocals. I have to commend how great and still young and spry and fresh this man's voice feels after all these damn years. It's insane. I think what eventually makes you like songs that you probably didn't like that first, that probably didn't hit for you that much at first, but eventually makes you like them over time, is these excellent vocal performances that really uncover, more surprises with each listen. Like, the way Usher is singing on this album, y'all, it's insane. Like, this man is like, I don't know how he does. Like, Usher has been like singing in the studio, recording, rehearsals, touring. Like, this man's just been singing his ass off for years and years and years. And for some reason, his voice sounds, shout out to all my artists that are like, Brandy, Beyonce. Shout out to all these artists who their voice is getting better over time. Like, shout out to all our black legends whose voices are getting better over time. This man, Usher, his voice, the way he uses it is so beautiful to witness on this album. And it's really the highlight of this album, besides the amazing production. And like I said before, it's just these amazing vocal performances. This man is singing his ass off. With how good Usher is singing on this album, you have no choice but to get into the groove of all these songs at some point because of how good he's singing. You know what I'm saying? Whether, it doesn't matter if it's a slow jam on the album or like one of like more of like the mid-tempo tracks or like one of the bangers or like one of the more experimental tracks. It doesn't matter like the vibe or like the mood he was on the album. Each type of vibe, each tempo, each mood, each song really shines in its own way vocally. And I love that he really kept his signature DNA and his signature stamp vocally on all these songs. And that's one thing I love. Even though some of these songs might have felt a little bit immature lyrically, maybe the album wasn't put together in the best way as a whole package, but especially, each song on its own, especially the ones that are good, man, Vocally, he was going insane. He was going super saiyan. This album is such a rewarding listen for that in particular, while keeping his signature stamp and DNA, which is everything. And it's just so great to see, Usher just find new ways to express, himself, vocally at this stage in his career. So this album was definitely one of the best parts of this album for me. And to me, this all just showed why this man is, one of my favorite vocalists, not only of his generation, but in my opinion of all time. Like Usher, that his tone, his skill, it's just like, I don't think we talk about enough. Like, this man is a singer, a vocalist, you know what I'm saying? And one of my personal favorite of all time. So, and he proved that on this album for sure. So yeah, man, I'm closing up on the general review before I get into, some thoughts on some certain tracks. So I'll end up by saying, while, like I said, while the sequencing and some weird tracks really let the album down as a whole in the very beginning, especially, I think the album does hit its stride towards towards the middle. And I really feel like there was several great tracks, back to back, several great joints on this album back to back, especially towards the end and the second half, especially when you get more listens with the album. I feel like this album that just definitely gets better and it covers more and just it gels more. It feels better once you listen to it more and more. At first, it's definitely jarring. You're probably gonna be let down, but when you take time to listen to it more and more, especially in the second half, this album definitely does go off for sure. And honestly, as an entire package, this might actually be his strongest album since the 2000s. I'd say. I feel like this is definitely stronger than Hard to Love as a whole. I definitely feel like it's stronger than, Looking for Myself. So I feel like this is the strongest offering as a whole project since the 2000s. So that's definitely commendable. Shout out to Usher for giving us some of his, I think this is his best set of songs as a project since the 2000s. So that's amazing. All right, so that's my overall review, but I just want to get into some quick thoughts on some of the not key tracks, but just some of the tracks I wanted to talk about really quickly in the review. So let's get into it. First up is the intro track, Coming Home. Definitely wanted to talk about the intro for the album for sure. This song is really interesting to me because I actually really hated this song when I first heard it. Like on my first few listens, I wasn't really feeling this song at all. I was so disappointed, and I was excited because I'm like, Usher, Burna Boy, like this, and honestly, I still feel like Burna Boy low key, like, now I'm gonna say he wasn't needed, but I wasn't in love with Burna's contribution to the song, even though I love Burna Boy. But I feel like he didn't really make the song any better. But I'm not mad he was on it. But even though I wasn't liking the song at first, it definitely grew on me for sure. And I really appreciate the whole Michael Jackson 80s vibe it has, that 80s pop sound, while being mixed with this Afro fusion sound that's kind of embedded in it. It's a really cool, unique sound that I really feel like for some reason it was really jarring at first, and I didn't think it was that exciting. And I definitely think there could be more added to the song to make it pop more, production wise and all that. It's a song that kind of just feels like it's here, but it's not a bad song. It just takes some listens to really get into you. But it definitely is a nice little earworm over time. I find it being in my head all the time, even though I don't think it's that great of a song, but for some reason it snuck into my brain. I don't know why, but it did. So it's doing something right, Next up, A-Town Girl. It's the only song on the album that I actually like. I'm not gonna say I hate, but it's the one song on the album that I would have taken off for sure. And I'm actually annoyed by A-Town Girl because I actually thought Latto's verse was great. I think Latto ate her verse. I love Latto's verse. She kills her verse. But unfortunately, I feel like even though the sample was so cute, Uptown Girl, the sample was so cute, but for some reason, it's almost like they didn't execute that song right. I just wasn't in love with how they executed it. That song felt so weird and corny to me, even though I wanted to like it because of the sample. Latto's verse was nice, the production was nice, but it just felt so corny lyrically. The way they executed the concept, it was just off to me. And I wanted to love it because Usher's from Atlanta. I know he wanted to put on for his hometown, but I just, as much as I tried, I couldn't get with A-Town Girl, and I wanted to. I just couldn't get with that track. To me, that was a throwaway. I get why it was on the album, and I appreciated it because of a lot of verse, and it was cute. But at the end of the day, I feel like it just didn't work for me. So let me know what y'all think about A-Town Girl, but I wasn't feeling it. Next up, let's talk about Cold Blooded. So Cold Blooded, to me, the beat for this song wasn't working for me at first at all. I wasn't really rocking with it. I didn't like the beat at all. Shout out to The Dream and Pharrell. I didn't like the beat at all. But for some reason, over time, this is another track that became an earworm for me. I don't know why, but for some reason, I was like, I don't like it. I found it being stuck in my head all the time. I don't know why. So yeah, I've come to like the song a lot more, but when I first heard it, I wasn't feeling it, but I've come to like it a lot more. I do wish the hook was a little bit more creative and that wasn't so repetitive. Should've loved you like I did. Oh, while he sounded good on the hook, I just wish it wasn't so repetitive. I felt like it made it sound weird, but like it sounded great. So I just wish it was more creative and not as repetitive. But the melody is addictive, which is why I think I like the song. That melody will get stuck in your ear, and I loved how he uses vocals in like this like soft and quirky, but then like loud and abrasive way throughout the song. It was a really interesting way to use his voice. I loved it, especially over like that thunderous beat. It was really interesting sonically. At first it threw me off, but it grew on me over time. It was also nice to have another song besides A-Town Girl and Margella that had like more of that hip hop vibe to it with the production and the arrangement. So I appreciate that about Cold Blooded as well. And shout out to him being on the production and on the boards. With Pharrell, and even though I love The Dream, I love you, my guy, but I didn't need The Dream's vocals throughout the song. I feel like I didn't like The Dream's parts on the song like that. But I wasn't mad at it, but I feel like I didn't need it. So The Dream, I love you, but I didn't need you on Cold Blooded, personally, but whatever. Kissing Strangers, the next single off the album, great choice. I think that's a great decision. Love the song. It's classic to me. It feels like a big song. It feels like it could be a big hit. Y'all go support it, stream it. Love Kissing Strangers, great song. Next up is Keep On Dancing, and I love that Keep On Dancing was produced by a black producer, Tricky Stewart, and not a white producer, no shade. I feel like Keep On Dancing feels like a perfect modern and better executed version of like his early 2010s like EDM pop era. I feel like this is like a better version of that even like black folk would appreciate. I feel like Keep On Dancing is like a song that like everybody would appreciate, and like even black folk wouldn't be ashamed to admit that they love this song. So I love that about this record, and I love that. I feel like this is a great inclusion on the album, and I love that it had like a nice like pop EDM moment, but it didn't feel too like early 2010s. It felt like a more updated and it felt more soulful. So I love Keep On Dancing, great track. I feel like this should be a future single, to be honest. I feel like it'll be a dope single. Give it a great video, push it to radio, then boom. Next up, I want to talk about Big. Listen, I truly hate that McDonald's line in Big. I hate that line. But honestly, everything else about this song is fire. I love Big. From the production to the arrangement, everything about this song is so fire to me, besides that McDonald's line. It's so cringy to me. But besides that McDonald's line, everything about the song is fire. Can we talk about it? This beat on Big is something else, y'all. The beat is so addictive. I love it. I really feel like I love how different and futuristic the song feels while still having that like, funk throwback essence in it with the horns. Love it. I really wish he played around with more tracks like this that had like more of this experimental and alternative sound, but that just had like more mature lyrics. Because I feel like the album would have felt way more like, I feel like the album would have been rewarded by just having songs that took more sonic risk like this, while still having, the mature lyrics that would have backed it up and made it feel like Usher. So yeah, but great song. Next up, let's talk about On The Side. On The Side is definitely one of the most interesting songs on the album for sure. I'm actually in love with On The Side, musically. I think musically it's a great record. Shout out to Jermaine Dupri and Michael Cox. It has that classic R&B sound to it. It's a timeless song in terms of how it's produced and how it feels. But I have to admit that for him to be singing these lyrics at his big age, it's just a little corny for me. And there's nothing wrong with having like side pieces or a rendezvous for a sexy, accomplished man like him. That's fine. But I feel like there's a way to at least make it like sound more like interesting and poetic and complex and dynamic than just like, I got a girl that I love on the side. Like, nah, like, I feel like he could have made like that idea. Like, this is the man who made Confessions. Like, I feel like he could have made this song, and him and JD and B Cox, they could have made this song feel like, more poetic and more interesting and complex than just, I gotta go on the side. Because musically, this song is so great musically. So it's like, but I feel like it was let down by like basic lyrics. But it's still a bop. It still goes off. But that's how I feel. Next up, I want to highlight Luckiest Man. I definitely want to highlight the song for y'all. Luckiest Man, I feel like Usher and team put crack in this song. I feel like Luckiest Man is just like pure top tier classic R&B vibes. Just good vibes on the song, but like, a simple but soulful and breathtaking arrangement and melody. Great song. To me, like, Luckiest Man is like one of the songs that just encapsulates this feeling the best. But there's plenty of other songs that feel just like this as well that I want to mention. But Luckiest Man I want to highlight. But to me, other songs that are like R&B excellence on this album that just feel like they're arranged so well. Top tier R&B vibes with the arrangement. Besides Luckiest Man, definitely I Am the Party. That's another highlight for me. I love I Am the Party. That song is crazy. I love that arrangement. Love that song. Stone Cold Freak, for sure. That song is everything. I Love You, Shout out D-Ma. I love that song. I Love You is great. And Please You as well. That run of I'm the Party, Love You, Please You, Luckiest Man, that run right there, insane. Yeah, so those songs are all like R&B caviar. Love those songs. Some of the best songs off the album for sure. So I want to mention that for y'all. Like I feel like some of the best shit on this album is like all like tucked like towards the end. It's crazy. Oh yeah, and also One of Them Ones. I want to add One of Them Ones to the list of songs that to me that just have like great top tier R&B vibes for sure. Last song I want to talk about is Standing Next to You, the Usher remix by Jungkook. The last track on the album is kind of like a bonus track in a way, but it's not. But I love this song. I love the original by Jungkook and the remix with Usher. I love this song. And I just wanted to say that I think it's crazy to think that Usher and his team of producers and songwriters couldn't actually give us more instant and addictive hits in the realm of Standing Next to You. I feel like that could have easily happened on this album, but it didn't really happen that much. Besides like, Kissing Strangers and Keep On Dancing a little bit. But I really feel like, that should have happened in the sense that, this sound is so perfect for Usher at this time, in the sense that like it's classic and nostalgic, with having that like funk feel, but not sounding like dated, and it still sounds like fresh and like bright and current. So Standing Next to You, like by Jungkook, his song hasn't done that well besides when it first premiered, which is unfortunate because it's a great song. But I really feel like Usher really could have like used more of that sound on this song for the album. I feel like this sound is like perfect for him. And I really feel like it would have worked for him so well. And I would have loved to have heard more of like his own version of this type of song throughout the album. So I think it's crazy that we didn't really get songs that sound more like Standing Next to You, but like by Usher and like by his team of producers and songwriters. I feel like that should have happened. But we have plenty, this album is still great. But I'm surprised we don't have more songs that feel like as big and as like, classic, like Michael Jackson at his peak, like Standing Next to You. So let me know what y'all think about that. I just had to mention that for y'all because I feel like this remix is a gem on it's a remix, but it's a gem on the album. And I feel like Usher would have done well to have made more songs that felt and sounded just like this. All right, y'all. So that was my overall review of Coming Home, as well as, a track by track review of some key tracks on the album that I wanted to talk about. Before I end the video, I just wanted to end off by just mentioning my favorite tracks on the album and rating the album. So for my favorite tracks on the album, while I pretty much appreciated every track on the album besides A-Town Girl, I think A-Town Girl was the only track I was cool on. But besides that, I appreciated every track for sure. But my favorite tracks on the album are definitely Good, love that song. Ben, love that song. Shout out to 21 and Summer Walker, love that record. Kissing Strangers, love that song. Risk It All, love Risk It All, such a beautiful record. Shout out to her. Stone Cold Freak, love that song. That song is crazy. I think that also be a cool single too. I love Stone Cold Freak. That should be a single as well. Stone Cold Freak is crazy. Ruin with Feels, I love Ruin. I've been bopping that song consistently nonstop lately. I love Ruin. Such a interesting chill bop. I love Ruin. So I love Ruin. Big, besides the McDonald's line, I love Big. That song is crazy. I Am the Party, love that song. Luckiest, Love You. Oh God, Love You such a bop. I Love You was such a bop. I love that song. Luckiest Man, one of the best songs off the album. That track is crazy. And then Standing Next to You, the remix, as the last track. Those are my favorite tracks off the album for sure. But every other track I love, but those are my highlights for sure. And for my rating for this album, I will give this album a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I feel like to me that feels right. I feel like this album, I'm not going to give it a 4 and above. I feel like that'd be too much. But I definitely don't feel like this should be like a 3 or less. That would be too mean. I feel like a 3.5, like a 3.5 out of 5 stars feels like perfect for me. This album wasn't like, I don't feel like this album was the best it could have been, but it also wasn't trash to me. Like it's definitely like a 3.5. Maybe a 4 on its best day, a 3 on its worst day, so I'm going to give it a 3.5. That feels good to me. So let me know what y'all think about my rating, and let me know what y'all think about this album, y'all. Let me know if you thought this album was trash, if you thought it was amazing, if you thought it could have been better. I think a lot of people were like kind of in the middle like me. Like y'all didn't think it was trash, but you also thought he could have done a little bit better in terms of putting the album together. So let me know if y'all feel that same way. Let me know what y'all thought about the sequencing. Let me know how y'all felt about the the production, the songwriting. Let me know what were your favorite tracks, your least favorite tracks. You know, let me know if there's tracks that you know he recorded that you wish should have been on here. Like, you know, I'm assuming they're probably produced by Jermaine Dupri and Brian Michael Cox. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, man, give me all your thoughts on the album down below. I appreciate it. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And also subscribe to my Patreon too. Link below in the description box. Go subscribe to my Patreon. $3 a month, where I have my exclusive content, longer exclusive videos. I have other videos I won't put on my YouTube channel, so definitely go check out my Patreon. If you rock with me, go support my Patreon, okay? Appreciate y'all. All right, y'all. But thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. This has been your boy Bright, the R&B Kid. Thank you for watching. But for now, I'm signing off, baby. Bye, y'all. Peace.
I came to vibe, you came to function, just do that, baby. Don't worry about nothing, no, 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 no. I came to vibe, you came to function, just do that, baby. Don't worry about nothing, no, no, no. Relax just a little bit. You don't gotta worry, you can just